My name is Marion Holt. I'm 63 years old. I'd never thought silence could sound so sharp until that afternoon by the Ashley River, when even the gulls seemed to pause. The lawn was trimmed to perfection, white chairs glinting under the Carolina sun, a string quartet murmuring somewhere beyond the hedges. I had arrived early. Old habits die hard wearing the navy dress I'd chosen weeks ago and carrying a small velvet box in my hand. Inside was my mother's sapphire brooch, meant to rest on Lily's bouquet as something borrowed. Something blue. The planner had updated the guest list to comply with venue occupancy limits. Security was instructed to check names strictly, even for family. The guard at the gate smiled politely at first, then glanced down at his clipboard. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your name isn't on the list. I thought I'd misheard." "It's Marion Holt," I said, offering a steady voice trained through decades of boardrooms and briefings. He looked again, shook his head, and the air between us thickened. Before I could press further, Lily stepped out from behind the archway, lace spilling like water around her feet. She looked radiant, every inch the woman I'd raised to stand tall, but her eyes didn't soften when they met mine. "I told you not to come. Mom." Her tone was low, clipped, rehearsed. "It's not personal. It's just, today isn't about you." The words slid under my skin like cold glass. A few guests turned. Someone adjusted a camera. Behind her, Ryan's mother whispered to a planner who pretended not to listen. I could have argued, begged, made a scene, but years in uniform had taught me the difference between retreat and surrender. So I straightened my back, pressed the velvet box into the guard's hands, and said quietly, "Then give her this." It was her grandmother's. The man hesitated. Lily's face stayed perfectly composed. A portrait for the society pages. I turned toward the parking lot, the river wind tugging at my shawl. The music swelled behind me, soft, elegant, practiced as if nothing had happened. When I reached my car, I realized my hands were steady. That surprised me most of all. 3 months earlier, she'd been sitting at my kitchen table, eyes red from crying, begging for help. That was the last time she had called me Mom with warmth in her voice. The phone rang just after 10 that night. I almost didn't answer. It had been weeks since I'd heard from Lily, but her name flashing across the screen pulled me in before reason could interfere. "Mom." Her voice cracked through the line, thin and panicked. "Everything's falling apart. Ryan lost his job last week, and his parents said they can't cover the venue anymore. We already signed the contract. I don't know what to do." For a moment, I heard only the sound of her breathing. Shallow and desperate, the same rhythm she'd had as a child when she'd fall off her bike and wait for me to fix everything. Old instincts woke up in my chest before logic could argue its case. "Take a breath," I said quietly. "Tell me the amount. It's $48,000. I know that's insane. I just need to hold the date. Please, Mom. I'll pay you back after the wedding. Ryan will find something." I could almost see her pacing, one hand pressed to her forehead. Still the girl who believed the world would end if it didn't go her way. I'd promised myself, after years of carrying her through every crisis, that I'd stop rescuing her. But promises like that fade when you hear your child cry. The next morning, I logged into my account and made the transfer. My hands trembled a little at first, then steadied as I typed the note for Lily's wedding love, Mom. Later that afternoon, she arrived at my house with a bouquet of lilies and the kind of smile I hadn't seen in years. She hugged me so tightly that it hurt. "I'll make it up to you," she said. "You'll be part of everything, I promise. You'll be honored at the ceremony." When she left, I found myself smiling at the closed door, the silence that followed feeling almost like peace. For the first time in a long while, I felt needed again. Needed. I didn't know it yet. But that feeling was the first step toward losing her. Chapter 3. First cracks. At first, I told myself she was just busy. Wedding planning could swallow anyone whole, and Lily had always wanted things perfect. Still, weeks passed with only short texts, busy today. Love you later, until even those stopped coming. When she finally called, it was to ask if I could meet her at the bridal shop for a fitting. I said yes before she finished the sentence. The boutique sat on King Street, all mirrors and soft music. Lily stood on a low platform while an attendant pinned the lace around her shoulders. She looked beautiful, but something about her posture, rigid, contained, made me hesitate before stepping closer. "Mom," she whispered as I adjusted the train. "When Ryan's parents come by, maybe don't bring up Dad's old truck." "Okay, they're different. They grew up with private schools and beach houses. I just want things to go smoothly." Her voice was kind, almost apologetic, but it cut all the same. I nodded, pretending to check a loose stitch. The attendant smiled at our reflection, oblivious to the way my daughter had just drawn a line between us. A week later, she invited me to the engagement photo session downtown. Ryan's parents arrived with their polished laughter and tailored clothes. When the photographer asked for family shots, Lily gestured toward me without meeting my eyes. "This is Marion," she said lightly, "a relative." For a moment, no one seemed to notice the omission, but I did. I smiled for the camera anyway, lifting my chin just enough to catch the afternoon light. The shutter clicked, and in that small, perfect sound, something inside me quietly fractured. Later, as I walked back to my car, I realized the lace from her dress had left a faint shimmer on my sleeve, something delicate, beautiful, and not meant to stay. The invitations arrived on a Thursday afternoon, delivered in a cream envelope with gold embossing. I had been expecting one, but still, my hands shook slightly as I turned it over. The paper smelled faintly of roses, Lily's favorite scent when she was a girl. The names were written in looping script. "Mr. and Mrs. Charles Reynolds request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their children." Lily and Ryan, no mention of me, not even a quiet in family. I stared at the card until the letters blurred, then set it carefully on the counter, afraid it might fall apart if I touched it again. A few hours later, an email arrived from the wedding planner. It began with cheerful efficiency. "Dear Ms. Holt, we just wanted to confirm your seating arrangement change, per Lily's request. You'll be at table 12 instead of the family table. Please reply to confirm." When I didn't respond right away, another message followed. "Actually, given recent updates, your attendance may no longer be required. Please confirm removal for final printing." I read it twice, then a third time, letting the words settle. The tone was polite, professional, bloodless. That evening, I called Lily. She answered on speaker. Laughter and music faint in the background. "Mom, don't overthink it," she said. Ryan wants a consistent image for the program. His parents think it's cleaner this way. It's not a big deal." I could hear her sipping something, her voice light, distracted. I wanted to remind her that I had paid for half that consistent image. Instead, I simply said, "All right, sweetheart," and hung up. Then I opened my laptop and forwarded every email to my lawyer, attaching the payment receipts. The act felt mechanical, almost surgical. Outside, the sun was setting over the marsh, the sky bleeding orange into gray. Some betrayals don't arrive with shouting, they come printed on fine paper, wrapped in perfect etiquette. The restaurant sat at the edge of the harbor, all white linen and soft jazz. Candlelight flickered across the table settings, catching in the crystal glasses and polished cutlery. I had chosen a navy dress, again simple. Steady, something that wouldn't draw attention. Ryan's parents arrived fashionably late, trailing the scent of expensive perfume and entitlement. His mother, Elaine, wore a silk shawl the color of champagne. She greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So you're the famous Marion," she said, her drawl carefully measured. Lily told us you're from… Where was it? Oh, Mount Pleasant. How charming. The way she said charming made it sound like a flaw. Ryan laughed and poured wine, adding, You should hear her tell stories. Mom, she's got that southern lilt like something out of a movie. Their laughter rippled around the table. Lily's joined in a half-second too late, brittle and uncertain. I felt it like a pinprick behind my ribs. The waiter placed plates of seared salmon before us. Conversation turned to golf memberships, vineyard investments, and destination weddings. I nodded when required, smiled when appropriate, shrinking myself into the spaces between sentences. When the dessert menus came, I reached into my purse and took out the small velvet box. Lily, I said softly, this belonged to your grandmother. I thought you might wear it tomorrow for something blue. She hesitated, her eyes darting toward Ryan's mother. Oh, that's sweet, she murmured, opening the box briefly before closing it again. I'll see if it matches the dress. She set it beside her wineglass and turned back to the conversation. By the time the waiter cleared the plates, the box was still there, untouched. The candlelight caught the sapphire through the thin slit of the lid, scattering blue reflections across the white tablecloth. I reached for my glass, pretending not to notice, but the shimmer stayed in my peripheral vision all evening, a small, beautiful thing no one wanted, shining quietly in the wrong room. The night before the wedding, my phone buzzed just as I was ironing my dress. A message from Lily lit up the screen. Mom, don't give a toast tomorrow. I just don't want tears. You know how emotional you can get. I read it twice, then set the phone down beside the folded napkin where my written toast rested. It was only a page long, simple words about love, endurance, and the way her father used to hum when he danced with her in the kitchen. I'd written it weeks earlier, in careful cursive, wanting to leave her with something warm and lasting. I unfolded the paper now, smoothing it against the table. The ink had faded slightly at the edges, as if even the words had grown tired of waiting to be spoken. I read it silently one last time, then folded it back into thirds and placed it in the drawer beside the checkbook and spare keys. The house was quiet. Outside, a few neighborhood lights shimmered across the marsh, their reflections bending in the wind. I hung my navy dress on the doorframe, adjusted the hem, and stepped back. It looked neat, unassuming, perfect for the background. On the dresser sat the empty velvet box that had once held the brooch. I ran a thumb along its worn edge and felt something inside me harden. Not bitterness, exactly, but something colder, cleaner. I didn't text Lily back. There was nothing left to explain. Instead, I poured myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the tide slide quietly out to sea. For the first time in months, my chest didn't ache. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was steady, deliberate. It was the sound of a boundary forming. Chapter 7. Quiet Preparations. By morning, the fog over the marsh had thinned to a soft silver. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my laptop. The folder marked wedding transfer blinked up at me. Neat and color-coded old habits from decades of bookkeeping. Every invoice, every receipt, every email was there, including my wire confirmation, $48,000 joint sponsorship agreement. The words that mattered most were in the fine print. The clause I'd insisted on months earlier, without much thought. Sponsor retains the right to withdraw funds should their participation or acknowledgement be revoked. I dialed my lawyer, Mr. Hanley, a careful man who had handled my late husband's estate. He answered on the second ring. I just need a confirmation, I said. If I'm being excluded, am I within my rights to freeze my contribution? He paused for a moment, then replied, completely within your rights, Mrs. Holt. Would you like me to handle the notice? No. I said. I'll do it myself. When I hung up, the decision felt less like defiance and more like arithmetic, just balancing an equation that had tilted too far. I typed one short email to the planner per the clause in the joint sponsorship agreement. I instructed Mr. Hanley to issue a withdrawal. The funds are held in escrow pending confirmation from the planner. If my presence is not welcome, my funds will be withdrawn accordingly. Please confirm receipt. Then I clicked send. The message sat in my outbox for a moment before disappearing. No reply came that day or the next. So I printed a copy, slipped it into a folder, and placed it in my briefcase. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and rain. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small. I wasn't waiting to be invited anymore. I was simply preparing for clarity. The air smelled of rain and gardenias when I arrived at the venue. A white canopy stretched across the lawn, strung with lights like stars caught in a net. Guests drifted in laughter and perfume, the sound of a string quartet humming through the breeze. 2 security guards stood at the entrance, holding clipboards. When I gave my name, their smiles faltered. "I'm sorry, ma'am," one said. "You're not on the list." I felt the pause ripple through the air, the soft turn of nearby heads, the curious tilt of a camera lens. I'd been invisible before, but never so publicly. Before I could speak, Lily appeared at the top of the steps. Her veil shimmered in the wind, her bouquet trembling slightly in her hand. She saw me, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might come closer. Instead, she turned to the guard and said, perfectly composed, "It's fine. She's not expected." Her words carried just far enough for the guests nearby to hear. The guard stepped aside. Uncertain, I stood still, the velvet of my clutch damp against my palm. Then I reached into it and took out my phone. "Mr. Hanley," I said when he answered. "You can proceed with the withdrawal, effective immediately." He hesitated only long enough to confirm the amount. I thanked him, ended the call, and slipped the phone back into my bag. Within minutes, the hum of the event began to shift. The caterer's assistant whispered something to the planner, who blanched and hurried toward the tent. A photographer lowered his camera, confusion flickering across his face as someone gestured about payment. I didn't wait to see more. The music played on, pretending everything was fine. I turned away, walking back toward the parking lot. My shoes sank slightly into the damp grass, and the sound of laughter faded behind me. Each step felt measured, deliberate, a quiet rhythm that belonged to no one but me. I had just reached my car when the first shout rose from the tent. It wasn't panic yet, just the sharp confusion of people realizing something had gone wrong. I turned slightly, enough to see the lights along the canopy flicker once, twice, then die altogether. The string quartet stopped mid-measure. A wave of murmurs rippled through the guests. Someone tried to laugh it off, just a glitch, but the music didn't return. A man in a suit sprinted toward the planner, who stood near the bar clutching her tablet. Even from a distance, I could read the panic in her movements. The caterers began whispering among themselves, glancing at their phones. A woman in an apron mouthed the words, "Payment declined." The event's payments were held in escrow, and the planner was legally required to halt services when funding instructions were revoked. Inside the tent, Lily's voice rose above the noise, high and desperate. "What do you mean, the power's off?" "The generators were paid for." Then Ryan's, angrier, louder. "This is unbelievable. You ruined our day." Their words carried easily through the open air. For a moment, I thought about leaving without another glance. But then I saw Lily push through the crowd, her dress catching on the damp grass. Her eyes found me. "Mom," she gasped. "Please fix this." I held her gaze. Steady and calm. "You didn't want me there," I said quietly. "Now I'm not." Her mouth opened as if to speak again, but no sound came. Behind her, The planner shouted into her phone. A server dropped a tray of glasses. The sound of shattering cutting through the evening like punctuation. I turned away and opened my car door. The river wind carried the faint scent of gardenias, now mixed with rain and disappointment. When I pulled onto the road, the venue lights were still dark in my rearview mirror, a celebration unraveling in the distance. Beautiful in its collapse. The first headlines appeared 2 days after the wedding. A Charleston lifestyle blog ran a piece titled, "Society Ceremony Ends in Chaos." By the end of the week, the story spread photos of guests waiting in the dark, quotes from caterers who never got paid, a whisper of unpaid invoices totaling more than $50,000. I didn't need to read all of it. The silence from Lily was loud enough. Weeks passed. The gardenias bloomed early that year, thick with scent. I spent my mornings tending the small patch behind the house and my evenings by the marsh, watching herons skim the water at dusk. The world, as it always does, went on. One humid afternoon, I heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel drive. When I opened the door, Lily stood there barefoot, her makeup smudged, the silk of her dress hemmed into something plain and practical. She looked smaller than I remembered. "Mom," she said softly. I was wrong. The words came out brittle, like something she'd practiced too many times. I motioned her inside and filled the kettle. She sat at the kitchen table, tracing the grain of the wood the way she used to as a child. Her ring finger was bare. "Ryan left," she murmured. "He said he can't handle the debt. I tried to fix things, but..." Her voice broke before she finished. I poured the tea and set a cup in front of her. The steam curled between us like something alive. "You wanted image, not roots," I said quietly. "Now you know image fades. Character stays." She nodded, tears sliding soundlessly down her cheeks. For the first time in months. She didn't try to defend herself. When she left an hour later, the sky had darkened over the marsh. I walked out to the porch and flipped the switch. The old light flickered once before holding steady, casting its amber glow across the front steps. I'd installed that lamp years ago so she could always find her way home, tonight. It burned for the same reason, but not for her alone. It was for the peace I'd finally earned, steady and warm against the dark.